And so she basically was unable to sign anymore from like maybe the last 10 years of her life. She just couldn't communicate at all. It's just like Alzheimer's patients, they kind of forget how to talk. Well, she just forgot how to sign, and we would sign, and she would just stare like, you know. And then I've got one deaf relative that's still alive. I had a deaf aunt and uncle. My uncle passed away. But I have a deaf aunt who's 90, who is an absolute baller. She's just a champion. I'm not kidding. One time, and she lives up in Seattle, and I asked every year, I'd be like, Virginia, will you come down? I'll drive you down. I'll bring you back. You know, and she's like, oh. One time she came in and was a guest speaker, and she's awesome. Just great. And so I'll sign with her, obviously, a lot. Well, the sign she learned, I mean, here's a perfect example. What's the sign for me that I learned for telephone was this. Okay? The sign that she learned for telephone was this. So, I mean, it's just a very, very fluid language, right? I mean, it's, so, and the people that I hung out with, the deaf people that I was always with, were my parents' age. And then if they had kids, they were my age. So, if they had deaf kids, or if they were hearing, because they all signed. And so we're all using this same, you know, and obviously things evolve, but that's why I'll always say to you, is this still the sign for that, or is this changed? But when SpongeBob first came out, this was SpongeBob.
That's my favorite sign.
Yeah, it's a great sign. So there's a lot of great signs, a lot of great iconic signs. And then there's other signs where it's like, who thought of that? I could have come up with something better than that.
Yeah. Right.
Okay, so I'll let you jot this down and maybe read it and paraphrase it, and then I'll try and explain it so that it makes sense to you. Talking about what's going on in the cochlea during that hearing process. And if you've never heard any of this stuff, that's cool, because it's good to know. And it's information that you can take with you the rest of your life, way to protect your hearing and appreciate your hearing, maybe more than anything. My dad used to often ask me what things sound like. And you know how hard it is to explain sound to someone who's never heard? So I always was just so thankful that, you know, I had normal hearing and that my sibling, and thankful that my kids do. But if I would have had a deaf kid, it would have been no big deal at all, because I'm already fluent. I looked at my parents were both very smart. My dad graduated from Gallaudet. He has a master's degree. My mom had an AA degree, but she quit school to get married, not because she couldn't have finished, but yeah.
How did you describe sound? Sometimes I've talked about sound concepts with deaf friends, but in the capacity that most of them have hearing to some degree, or with their hearing aids, or they've heard a sound, or they, you know, but I always think about, you can say, oh, you know, it's real loud,
Yes.
low sound, and you're like,
Yeah.
wait, they're not going to understand low,
Right.
other than like close to the ground. That's
Right.
not the right concept. So I always think about, I mean, would you use color to describe it?
No, and we didn't use light either, and that's something that people do now, you know,
Yeah.
like to try
Like
and
CymaSpace, yeah.
the big
Mhm.
booms with the big flashes and that. It was like for some unknown reason, we were encouraged to play the piano. I think it was because my older sister liked the piano, and I hated the piano, but all three of us older ones had to take piano lessons because one of us was. And they'd say, well, you know, what does this note sound like? Yeah, feel it. That's
Yeah.
it. That
Yeah.
that was all. It was, well, like this one is is lower, you know, and then when you get over here, it's higher, and is this a stronger, and I mean, how do you explain it?
A series of vibrations, yeah.
Yeah.
Or like my deaf friends will hold a balloon if we went out dancing. They hold you could hold a balloon or feel right here to feel the
Yes.
vibrations, but it's still a vibration. It's not a sound, you know.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
I don't know. Abstract thought.
So in the cochlea, you know, in Gary, you've got all these thousands of tiny, tiny, tiny hair cells. Tiny hair cells. And I listened to a professor at OHSU once, and she kind of described them as, think about really thin blades of grass. And when the sound wave, you know, shake, shake, shake all the way to the oval window, and shakes the oval window and shakes the cochlea, there's fluid in that cochlea. And when that cochlea starts shaking, that fluid disturbs the hair cells. So when the hair cells get hit with the fluid, just like a blade of grass getting hit with, or wheat getting hit with the wind, it kind of pushes it down. And that stimulates an electrical impulse to go to the brain. Well, in normal hearing, anybody that hears normally, no matter how loud or how soft, different hair cells are stimulated. And if your hearing is good, they'll send that impulse and then pop right back up. If you have damage to the hair cells, and the number one way that you damage the hair cells is too much noise. So if you talk to people that have been in the military, if they've been around artillery fire, if you talk to people that work with jackhammers or heavy equipment, or musicians for Pete's sake, or you're one of those that's always got earbuds in, or you fall asleep with your music blaring, you're risking permanent damage. It's not going to happen tomorrow. But has anybody been to a concert and then the next 3 days you're like, oh my God, right? Anytime you're doing that, you're risking long-term damage going forward. And the thing that's worrisome now for your generation and my kids who are 30, 28, and 25, I mean, when I was growing up, I hate to date myself, but have any of you guys heard of a Walkman? Okay, like when I was in high school, it was like, oh my God, look, there's a Walkman. And it had, you know, this with the, you know, the thing here, and I was like, wow, that was super cool. But it was never loud. You know, nobody, you know, they didn't make them so you could crank the music like that. Well, then as things have evolved, you know, these headphones are much better than the earbuds. The earbuds are not good. We didn't do earbuds in our house because if you listen to music at more than 50% of the volume with those earbuds, and I know that a lot of you do, I know a lot of high school kids do, they'll come in and they'd come into class and right as they walk in, I mean, I'm singing the same song because I can hear it perfectly. If you do use the earbuds, you're not supposed to use them for more than 15 minutes at a time. So if you have a habit of falling asleep with them, I would encourage you to break that habit right away. You know, just turn your music on in your room. That's better than if you've just got everything just pounding and pounding your eardrum and pounding those cilia, those hair cells. Because once they're dead, they're dead. At this point, we don't have a way to fix that. Although that's where the research is going now. All the research is being pushed on, used to be on the, let's improve the hearing aids, let's do this cochlear implant, let's have a double cochlear implant, let's do this. Now they're realizing, you know what, we'd be a lot better off in the long run if we figured out a way to regenerate hair cells, or if we could figure out a way to make artificial bones in the ear if somebody is born without those bones. And that's where the science is going. And I told the other classes, my youngest daughter, when she was at Purdue is a research university like University of Washington, and she worked in a lab, and she had a few different things she could choose from, but she chose because of her grandparents and probably because of me. She probably felt like she should, not that she wanted to. But she worked in a lab for a year that was studying the cochlea of chicken embryos, and trying to figure out a way that we could regenerate the hair cells in the chicken embryos. So it's pretty cool stuff, pretty cutting edge stuff. And then the auditory nerve, once the electrical impulse gets to the auditory nerve, it just goes right to the brain. And then we hear, we can interpret the sound. And if you think about it, it seems like an awful lot, but it happens like that, super fast. And that's pretty much the hearing process. The last thing I would like you to write down is about the semicircular canal, and that's this stuff up here. You see these wishbone type things up here? The role of the semicircular canal is to help you maintain balance. And this is not balancing air pressure. This is like balance as in, can I stand up without falling down? Can I run without falling down? Can I ride a bike without tipping over? And the semicircular canals are connected to the cochlea. If you have a problem with your semicircular canals, you usually struggle with dizziness and balance issues. I can tell you that my mom was not born deaf. She was born very hard of hearing and became deaf as she got older. And every time she was going through a stage where she started to lose more of her hearing, she would be so dizzy all the time, like she couldn't get out of bed for a few days at a time. And then she would level back out and she would know, oh yeah, I need a stronger hearing aid, until the stronger hearing aids just kind of went by the wayside, and then they got tossed. So just to recap, again, on my tests, I didn't care if kids wrote how I wrote it, as long as they got stuff in order. Sound waves are funneled by the pinna down the ear canal. Sound waves hit the eardrum. Eardrum starts to vibrate. That vibrates the malleus. That vibrates the incus. That vibrates the stapes. That vibrates the oval window. That shakes up the cochlea. Fluid in the cochlea starts swishing around in there. That stimulates the hair cells, and they send the electrical impulse to the brain. That kind of makes sense? If there is a disconnect anywhere in that process, then you're not going to have normal hearing, right? If you've got some dead hair cells, not all of them, but some, you are probably going to be hard of hearing. If you've got a problem...
Yo, she's not done talking. Just wait a second.
Yeah, for real, guys.
If you've got a problem with your eardrum with scarring, you're not going to have normal hearing. Are we still 2:05?
Yeah.
But everybody usually packs up at 2 o'clock.
Try to.
Yeah. Well, don't you have a new principal this year? Remember? Bell to bell learning. Yay!
Right. Woo!
Anyway, did anybody have any questions or comments? Yeah. That I have no idea, and I'm going to be honest, I have not tried to research any of that because